This is a story written in real time based on the randomly generated word recycle. Recycle. We begin. Give me that chicken breast, said the young boy. Well, there was only two left, and his dad wanted both. And so he cut off a quarter of one of the chicken breasts and gave it to his son Chauncey. Chauncey stuck his fork in it, lifted it up, looked at it, and looked back at his dad and said, "Why is it so small?" And his father said, "It's small because you're small, Chauncey. You're small and I'm large, and I need to do large things while you do small things." And Chauncey said, "Well, how am I going to do large things if I stay so small? I ain't going to get big eating these little tiny pieces of chicken, am I?" And his father, Winston, said, "You've got to earn your chicken, son. You've got to earn your chicken just like the rest of us." And Chauncey didn't like this at all, and he dropped the piece of chicken and he refused to eat it out of protest, and he pushed his chair back from the table and stomped up to his room. And Winston set about eating his two chicken breasts. He reached over and grabbed Chauncey's fork and just bit right into it. And that was the relationship between father and son in this household. Winston's wife, Chauncey's mother, had long since passed, and they'd settled into a steady but somewhat resentment-filled dynamic between the two of them. And one day, Chauncey woke up and he said, "No more." His father dropped him off at school, and he said, "All right, son, you learn a lot, and then one day you'll be able to do big things like Papa." And Chauncey's like, "I don't call you Papa, Dad. Why do you always say Papa? You always refer to yourself in the third person as Papa, as though I call you Papa. I've never called you Papa. Stop putting words in my mouth, Dad." And Winston was like, "There you go. You're fighting for yourself. That's what I like to see." And he hit the gas and skidded, like peeled out of the school parking lot. And Chauncey's like, "Oh man, Winston sucks. I hate Winston so much." And he, instead of going to school, he walked in the front door, put his bag in the locker, locked it up, and walked right back out. A 12-year-old boy deciding he's sick of school, he's had enough to learn. He needs to learn in the school of life. And he just started walking. Started walking down Main Street, and he didn't know what he was going to do, but he was looking for a job. He was looking for a work. He was looking for large things to do. And, well, first he passed by a framing shop. They sold frames and stationery and all sorts of things like this. And Chauncey looked in and he's like, that's interesting. And he walked in and talked to the man behind the counter, and he said, "What do you do here?" And the man said, "Well, we frame things. It's a framing shop. We make custom frames for portraits and pictures and anything you want to hang in your room. We can print things for you as well." And Chauncey was looking around as he said this, and he's like, "They're all quite small, aren't they?" The man said, "Well, we do like, small things for if you want to have a wallet-sized picture, we can do that. If you want a portrait on your desk, we can do that. I guess that's relatively small, but we can also do quite large things that can put on a whole wall. That's pretty big, right?" And Chauncey looked at it, and he stared the man in the face, and he said, "Not big enough." And he turned around and he walked out of the store. And it was pretty rude. The guy didn't really care for that. But what was he going to do? He had more business to be done. So he said, kid's dumb. I'll carry on with my framings." And Chauncey kept on down the main street. And then he passed a butcher shop. And he walked in and he's like, "Oh, there's something big going on here. There's knives. I smell blood. There's a bunch of raw meat everywhere. This is a bit of Chauncey. right here. So he walked in and he talked to and he said, "You there, giant man." Good start. And a big fellow with a big belly stepped up to the counter and peered over at him, tiny little Chauncey, and he said, what do you want, kid? You got work to do." Chauncey said, "What do you do here? I'm looking to do big things." The man said, "Well, we do pretty big things here. We take big animals and small animals as well. We take big animals and we break them down into small pieces and so people can eat them and be nourished and satiated and they can grow big and strong. Wouldn't you like to grow big and strong?" And Chauncey said, "Well, that is tempting. I would like to grow big and strong, but it feels like that'll take time, and I don't have time to spare. Also, it seems like you take things that are big and you make them smaller by chopping them into smaller pieces, which is the opposite of what I want to do. So," and then he stared the man in the face and he said, "Not big enough." And Chauncey turned on a heel, strode out the door, and the bell rang as he clanged behind him, and the butcher watched him go in confusion and was like, "Well, good luck to that kid." And then he smacked a giant lamb's leg in two with a huge cleaver. And Chauncey kept on walking down the street, and he walked down pretty much past every store there was in that street. He walked past the grocery store, he walked past the post office, he walked past everything, and he came in and stopped and talked to the people there, but everything that they said was just too small for Chauncey. And finally, he walked to the outskirts of town, because he was trying everything. He walked as far as he could, and there he came to the dump. And he saw many things. He saw giant heaps of things. He saw big, old refrigerators. He saw sides of houses that had been torn down and broken up and cast aside. It was just hills and hills and piles of rubbish and things that had been cast away. And he walked through them, and everything did look quite small, but he looked at everything collectively and he said, "I think I could make this big enough." And he looked at everything, and that day he went back home and pretended he picked his bag up from his locker, and his father picked him up and similarly was a dick at dinner and didn't give him as much food as he wanted, but he knew it didn't bother him as much because he knew he had plans in mind. And so the next day he pretended to go to school but went off to the dump, and well, he started taking various objects and putting them together to create big, massive, giant creations, and really created big dinosaur-looking things. He created he created mechanical contraptions that when he cranked a big lever, they put things along a line and smashed new things into the things that were going along the line to create randomized sort of art creations that then popped out the back end of the conveyor belt as he was turning the giant wheel. And he was just creating many of these massive contraptions. And this went on for days, for weeks, and at a certain point, someone came by the dump and they looked around, and there were all of these massive, coagulated heaps of rubbish that created big formations and creatures and characters and maps and landscape, all sorts of things. And he said, what created this giant world of trash recycled wonder? And he heard a little ruffling from beyond one of the rubbish hills, and he walked over it, and he saw little Chauncey there, cranking his wheel and putting things together, and he said, "You there, boy." And Chauncey said, "What?" He's like, okay, there's no need for an attitude, child. What are you doing here? And Chauncey turned. He said, I'm making big stuff. And the man said, well, I'm the mayor of this town, and I'm also the most renowned art critic in the world, because those two jobs go hand in hand. And I think you're creating something of a size and magnitude that the world has never seen. And Chauncey's like, yeah, that's the goal. That's pretty much what I'm setting out to do. So, you get it, buddy. And together, they put together a big art exhibition that would take over the entire town park, like the central park of the city. And every pocket and every corner of the park and every hill were filled with these giant monstrosities that were created with rubbish, essentially, just recycled rubbish. And the mayor art critic invited all of the biggest artists and fashion designers and film directors and great thinkers of the modern age. And he had them all walk through, and he didn't tell them that it was a small boy who created all of these things, and they all walked amongst these towering wonders. And they all said the same thing. They said, wow, the scope of this is massive. To use things that were old, things that were thrown away, to create such towering wonders, to recycle things into such huge feats of vision. Truly revolutionary. Only then, when they had all written their pieces, and the inspiration had been sent throughout the farthest corners of the world, then they revealed that it was all created by a little boy named Chauncey. And well, his father was furious. He said, Chauncey, what have you done? You've been skipping school to create this, to create what? What are these? And Chauncey said, they are my creations, and they are massive. Winston said, what are you doing? Chauncey said, see them, papa, see them. And Winston said, all right, since you called me papa, I will go see them. That's all I ever wanted. And so he went and walked through them, and Chauncey was there waiting at the end of the road, at the end of the path that led through the park, and he saw his father approaching, and his father was walking very slowly, looking between the various pieces, and when he finally reached the end and looked up to Chauncey, a single tear fell down his cheek, and he said, Chauncey, you've created something far bigger than I could have ever imagined, and I'm proud to call you my son. And the two embraced, and Winston said, it wasn't what I thought it would be, it wasn't anything I could have possibly imagined, but you can create something big in your own way. Your own way, Chauncey. But you do have to go to school from here on out. That's an important thing, I feel like. And Chauncey's like, I just wanted to prove a point first, and then, education. I do need that. But I think I'm gonna, after I get my education, I think I'm gonna go to art school. And Winston's like, it's a plan. And so they linked arms and skipped back through the pathway, looking at all the various giant creations. And the legend of Chauncey grew, and he became the most successful artist in all the land. And Mayor Art Critic was his partner and manager, and together they inspired the world. The end. And so is the legend of Chauncey. Now, we can do better than that. The monstrous, mashed up masterpieces of little Chauncey Billups. No, Chauncey Billups is a basketball player. The monstrous mashed up masterpieces of little Chauncey. Just little Chauncey. Little Chauncey Fellows. There we go. Monstrous mashed up masterpieces of little Chauncey Fellows. The end. Oh, God. Alright, if you like this kind of shit, subscribe. I'm gonna do more. See you later.